That's right. It is tier list time. I'm going to be doing a tier list for each of the partnered regions and basing these sort of takes off of what I saw at the lock-in tournament. I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts on each team and what I think their season is going to look like this year throughout 2023. So let's go ahead and hop into it with 100 Thieves. And 100 Thieves is, for me, a solidly A tier team. I don't think they are quite at the upper echelon of the Americas. I think that they showed some nerves at the lock-in tournament. I think that they have quite a bit of growing to do. But that's also potentially a good thing because they can get a lot better this year. I think they have the talent, they have the players, and they have, the support of their org to continually improve throughout the year. I think they need to figure out their role situation. The Cryocells Raze experiment, I think, should not be continued. I think you just put Austin on the Raze. He's one of the best Raze players in the world. And you just kind of work with what you have and the skills of your players. So I think that they will continually get better throughout the year. I could see them potentially becoming an S tier team by the end of the year, but at the moment, they aren't quite at that upper echelon, so they're at A. Moving on to KRU. KRU is a team that for me last year was solidly in the B tier. I think they're a decent to good team, but they lost Mazzino and they lost Kezenet, so they became a worse team. And even though it sounds like Kezenet is probably going to be coming back to them, I think it's just extra chaos, extra drama, and simply they just don't have the player quality, in my opinion, to compete with a lot of these teams in the Americas League. So I'm dropping them down to C tier. I don't think that they are the worst team in the league. I don't think that they are really going to do much in terms of noise. I mean, the best that they could hope for is probably maybe like the bottom half, in my opinion. I just don't think that they can really compete as far as like the individual player quality goes. And, I'm willing to be surprised, but for them, I think it's going to be kind of a long, disappointing year. Moving on to Leviatan, who took KRU's two best players. I think that they showed a lot of promise. I think that they showed a few weaknesses as well. They had a ton of hype going into the tournament. Everybody was saying they were dominating scrims. And what they showed us on the main stage was pretty good. They were really good on a couple of maps. They looked like they had no fear at times, but then they also kind of crumbled when they played against some of the better competition. I think that they are an A tier team, but I think that their range of performance is a little bit concerning as far as their ability to reach like the S tier and compete against the likes of somebody like an Energy or Loud. Or potentially win an international lane. I don't think that they showed that quite yet. Maybe they will continue to grow and get better. For me, I think they're basically at the exact same level as 100 Thieves. I think if these teams were to play like 10 best of 5 series against each other, it would probably end up about 50-50. Moving on to one of the teams I just mentioned, NRG, I think they are our first S tier team. And the reason for that is, they lost. They didn't make it to the finals, but they lost to one of the finalists, and they lost in a series that realistically could have gone either way. I think we saw some really good things from NRG. We saw like the core good parts of the Optic roster from last year, and I was extremely pleasantly surprised with how Sam played. I definitely had been somebody that was doubting him throughout all of last year and heading into this year. And I think that his performances on the Smokes role were actually quite good. Maybe he's just one of those players that needed to be reined in a little bit by switching roles. I thought that he was always kind of like too aggressive, overheating constantly when he was on that jet role, trying to do too much, feeling too much pressure to sort of carry the game, and oftentimes just losing his team rounds because of that. So maybe switching roles to a role that's a little bit less sort of pressured to carry the round puts him in a spot where he can just kind of rely on his skills to get a ton of value out of a role that doesn't necessarily require you to be incredibly mechanically gifted, but if you are, you can look really, really good. I think Artist fits in perfectly to this team, both in terms of mentality and also in terms of his skill set. And I really do think that Energy is just going to consistently be one of the best teams in North America and also in the entire world. I would expect them to potentially, fight for a title this year. So, okay, moving on to Cloud9. This one is, there's no other place to put them other than D tier. And this is not to say that I think that, they couldn't just add sort of like two decent players to the core of Zeppa and Leaf and Zelsis and end up being like a mid-tier team. Maybe I should just put them at B, like with the 3 players plus the 2, but honestly, I'm kind of just down to hate on CloudNine right now. I think that they just have totally fumbled the offseason. I don't like how they're handling the Ye situation. It's unfortunate if they're experiencing some financial problems, but right now they have 3 players on the roster, so I can't put them anywhere other than at the very bottom, because it's going to be a chaotic year for Cloud9 fans. And if they do really, really well, that'll be extremely surprising. All right, moving on to Sentinels. Sentinels is a tough one for me because they obviously have incredible player quality. They've got, a lot of potential on this team. But I also saw at lock-in what looked like 2 different teams. You kind of had like the Saucy Pancata playing their game, and then you had Tens and the Exet duo of Def and Zekin kind of playing their game. And it just didn't really feel that connected. So that's definitely something that can improve and will improve throughout the year. That being said, I am a little bit concerned about just kind of roles and, communication and ideas. It seems like they maybe have too many cooks in the kitchen potentially. With you've got Def and Psycho coming in from Exet. Obviously, they're doing a lot of the game planning together, but then you've got another sort of like well-known coach in Kaplan who maybe has his own philosophy, and then you've got Saucy, who is also kind of a potential leader for Loud. I think it's going to be a potentially rough year for Sentinels, but I also could see them gelling and simply winning games based on how good their players are. I mean, the performances that we saw from Zekin at lock-in are not going to continue. He is going to perform better than that. He's a very, very good player. I think for me, I'm putting Sentinels in the B tier with the potential to get up to A if they can sort of figure out their chemistry issues and, gel as a team. I definitely could see them, being in the top 3 of this region. Okay, MIBR. This maybe was the worst team at all of lock-in. They literally did not look like they were of the same caliber as any other team. They looked so uncoordinated. They looked like a ranked team playing against a bunch of structured teams. And I don't know why that is. They have the former coach of Loud, Bazooka. And maybe it's because he's trying to sort of like revamp their entire structure and get them to fit into whatever system he wants to run, and that can take some time. They have some very, very talented players. They have heat. They've got a lot of firepower, but they looked awful. It looked truly awful at lock-in, and that does not bode well for the rest of the season. Maybe it was the pressure of being in Brazil. That's also possible. And, going to America and having low expectations will allow them to play better. Maybe they should just be at the bottom of C because they actually have a full roster and Cloud9 doesn't. But for me, I'll put them slightly ahead of Cloud9 just because they have a full team, but I'm going to put them in D tier because I thought they were extremely disappointing. Furia for me was one of the more surprisingly good stories of the tournament. I thought they looked really good. I thought, obviously they lost to Fnatic in a super close series. And I think that they have the potential to be kind of a spoiler this year in North America, in the Americas League, because, there's only 3 spots, right? You would think that one is probably going to go to NRG. You think one is probably going to go to Loud based off their performance at lock-in. And that 3rd spot, I think a lot of people will be betting on Sentinels. A lot of people will be betting on 100 Thieves. A lot of people will be betting on Leviatan. But I would definitely not sleep on Furia. I thought they are a very dangerous team with a lot of just kind of explosive potential. MW0 is the truth. And if I remember correctly, a good chunk of their team played together last year. So they didn't make a lot of roster moves. So they don't have a whole lot of sort of like team chemistry growth that they need to do this year to compete. So I think that they are kind of right up here with 100 Thieves and Leviatan, and on any given day, they could take a series off of anybody in this league. Okay, so our last S tier team is going to be Loud, and you know what? I think we have to put them ahead of NRG because they beat NRG, and they made it to the finals, and they honestly could have won the entire tournament at lock-in. I'm just supremely impressed with how the two new players integrated in. I thought they both looked incredibly good, Thieves and Cow and Zine, adding to the core of Loud, who won champions last year. Didn't really seem to be missing a beat. You know, that final series was incredible against Fnatic, and honestly, they just looked like champions. They played like champions. The pressure, you know, maybe got to them in those last couple of rounds, but they just didn't really seem phased by anything. They were thriving off the crowd's energy. They were, you know, just taking the fight to every team that they played, and they looked super good. And most of their maps look super good, and their roles look super good. I would, again, not be surprised to see Loud just at the top of the Americas League for the entire year. It's clear that whatever they're doing over there is working, and I would just expect them to continue sort of that excellence throughout the year. So our final tier, our final team in the Americas League is Evil Geniuses. And I think that they're going to slot right into B tier. I thought they looked pretty good. I thought Ethan looked particularly very good. I thought they had some pretty cool ideas, which is sort of like the EG thing. They've got, you know, some cool set strats. They've got some good ideas about how to play the maps. I do think that as far as like the individual player performance goes, there's a little bit too much of a fall off between their players. And I could see this team shuffling some of their roster a bit. You know, they have the 10 players on salary. We could see some swapping between their two teams. And we'll just kind of have to see how they develop. You know, they have a lot of support. They've got a lot of staff. They've got a lot of players to work with. I thought they were pretty good, but I think that just compared to the rest of the competition in this league, it's gonna be very hard for them to compete week in and week out. And the firepower of the top 5 teams that you can see here is probably just a bit higher than EG. So that is the Americas tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and stay tuned for the next one.